Hi, folks. Welcome back to our terrific every other Thursday training videos. It's nice to have you joining us today. We've got a special guest, but first, I'm Christopher Brannon with the Coeur d'Alene Public Library and the Cooperative Information Network.
And I'm George Williams. I'm the Next Search Catalog Coordinator at Northeast Kansas Library System.
And I'm Michael Adamick. I'm the Digital Resources Manager at the Central Kansas Library System.
Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you here. I always love it when we can add somebody new to the mix. And I think we've only had 3 other guests on our program. So you're number 4, and that's great. I'm glad to have you here.
It's kind of like a sainthood.
Today, we're going to be talking about SQL reports. Particularly, we had a conversation generated in our Slack chat regarding a project that you were working on, Michael. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what started the whole conversation?
Sure. So for Kansas libraries, we have an annual, each library has to fill out the annual state survey, and they have to gather a lot of statistics. And several years ago, CKLS started gathering and pre-filling a lot of that information for libraries to save time for them. And one of the statistics that we gather for the state is circulation, and we gather them by month. But the way that the state wants the circulation statistics is not really the same way that we have things set up in Koha. And so let me go ahead and share my screen here, and I will show you the basics of what the state wants. So on the state report, we've got all of our libraries, and then the circulation statistics for each month. And then at the bottom, we've got these 3 different tabs. We have adult material circulations, children's material circulations, and other material circulations. And so the state only wants those 3 things. If it doesn't fit in adult or children's, it would be things like movies not movies, e-devices, and things that don't really fit in any category would go in other. So previously we had a report that we would run monthly, and it was set up automatically for a cron job to get sent to an email address. And then as you can see, it's broken down by the branch code, and then we've got collection codes. And so all of the numbers are broken out by collection code for each library. We've got the renewals and the issues, and we just want the totals. But we didn't really have a way to break them up into adult and children's and other. And so for each library, we had to go through and every month add up which ones were children's, which ones were adult, which ones were other, and then keep track of that number, and then take that number and put it into the report. As you can imagine, going through 54 libraries and doing this every month, it took multiple hours, just these statistics. And I realized there's got to be an easier way to do this. And so I started a conversation on Slack about how to make things like this easier. And we came up with a few different ideas.
Yeah, well, the first idea I saw there was you were talking about dates. And that was the thing that I saw. And so the first report that you posted was really similar to one that I rewrote a little bit. But this is, so, you were doing items, collection code, and count item number. And then you had a where statement that was essentially saying where the month and the year is last month.
Right.
And the question that you had on Slack and so this works. I mean, if you run this, it gets you everything for the previous month, the branch, the collection code, and then the count. Count of items, I think, is what we had for that first report that you were showing. And the question that you had is, was there a way to do different months, an easy way to do that? Yeah. And the 2 solutions I had were to use Dropdowns, and this is something that we use in Neckles a lot. And so I've got them defaulting to the previous month. But the way that we do this is it's the exact same report. It's home branch, collection code, and count item numbers. But instead of the where being the year last month and the month last month, I'm using authorized values. So we have authorized values, whoops, in our admin. If we go to authorized values, I've got one set of values that that's just called year. And it's just a list of years, 17 different years. We go back to all the way to 2007. So anytime I do a pipe and then year in a runtime parameter in a report like this, it's going to pull this list of it's going to give me a drop down that has all these values in it. And then I've got the exact same thing with month. So I've got 01, 02, all the way through 012, and then 01 January, 02 February. And the reason I do the 01 January, 02 February is so that they sort, in numeric order instead of alphabetical order in that drop down. And so if you do that, if you create those authorized values, then when you run this, that's what gives you these handy drop downs. We can do 2023 May. And it's really easy for our staff to run those. Because that way they don't have to put in a date. So my third sample here is written so that we use a date range. And the trick with date ranges in Koha is if you just put in an input box and you put a date range here and you want a date from 2023, 05, 01, it has to be in that format in MySQL. And this is why I don't like doing this kind of date, because some staff member, if I put a note in there that says be sure to use this date format, it won't matter. Some staff member will use this date format with the slashes, the American format, and then it won't work.
You'll just get no results.
So I try not to do this, but this works. It's the same report, and I just gave it a date range instead of using the drop downs or having it hard coded to run for the previous month. And the way to edit it to make it so that you do get a date picker is to put a pipe after the input and then date. And then we'll do another pipe. And then if we run it again, this will give us the handy calendar input that lets us, pick and choose dates. So with the advantage of this, of course, is that you can, instead of doing a whole month, you could just do like 1 week, or you could do, weird date combinations like June 4th to July 29th and get a result for that way. So those are the different ways that we talked on Slack about modifying the dates. But it led to further discussion, because one of the things that we can get away with here in doing an item count is a date range that goes from that just uses dates, because the items accession in Koha is just a date field. So there's a big issue though if you try to use dates in a date time field. Because date fields will only have the year, month, and date in them. But date time fields have the year, month, date, time, like hours, minutes, and seconds, and all the way down to the nanosecond. So you could conceivably write a report that says how many items checked out between noon on Friday and 1:45 on Friday. You would have to, put in the ways to input the hours, minutes, seconds, and then get all the way down to the nanosecond. So you can do that, but if you just put a single date into a date time field, the problem is that it's always going to assume that you're talking about midnight on that date. So if a simple date works for an item count because it's just a date field, but if you're doing issues or statistics or times when there's just a whole bunch of date time fields, you've really got to know what's a date field and what's a date time field. Because if you use a date like January 1st through January 31st on a date time field, when you put in January 31, it's only going to go till midnight on January 31. So you're going to lose all the data from midnight to 11:59 p.m. You'll essentially lose a whole day's worth of data. And the way to, so if you're dealing with the date time field, the way to avoid the problem is to add a little tiny bit of extra code. And around date 2, you put plus interval 1 day. And what that does is it takes whatever date you input there and it adds a day to it. And so if you do January 1 through January 31 on a date time field, and it's got that plus interval 1 day, it's really plugging in February 1st. And
You
so
don't have to
getting
use a
everything
function name on that?
a function name?
Yeah, usually I put like date add and then use that interval.
No, I just use
Oh.
plus interval. That's all I've ever needed.
Okay. Well,
And it's, I hope I haven't been screwing up for the last, 11 years. I don't think I have though, because I've tested it and everything seems to work. So
well, okay.
that was the first thing we addressed though on Slack, was we talked about different ways to use the date time fields, and the date range and the date dropdowns are good. I really like the date dropdowns for this kind of monthly data because it really makes things simple for the people that are actually running the reports.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to add my take on this whole conversation. Before I do, I just want to take a moment to mention a couple things. So this episode is actually our kickoff for season 4. So we're this is our first video in September, and will be the first episode for this season. And we're going to be this will be released like the week before our conference back here, Explore the Possibilities, which is going to be in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. We hope to see a lot of you there. We're up to 51 people at this point coming to the conference. I know there's a few more that are going to be coming. So we're excited to see everybody there. And we're going to take just a quick pause to talk about our sponsor, koha-US.
This video is sponsored by koha-US, your place to look for all things Koha. Whether you're just starting out with Koha or you've been with Koha for a while, koha-US is a great place to find resources, learn new tips and techniques, or connect with other users and libraries. Koha-US provides excellent information, both original and curated from around the internet, including the terrific every other day training videos. You will also find several special interest groups to connect with, as well as our general monthly meeting where we gather to talk about the latest Koha news. You should also check out the koha-US annual conference, held at various locations around the US. This is a great opportunity to meet with other users face-to-face, and build your Koha network, as well as new friendships. And of course, don't forget about the great presentations. Koha-US is also actively involved in the Koha community by contributing towards new developments. If you are interested in contributing towards Koha-US funded developments, join the Koha-US membership. Your annual membership builds the funds to sponsor new developments in the community, and as a member, you also help shape Koha-US with your membership votes, and receive a discount on the annual conference. You can also contribute towards developments through a direct donation, or by purchasing some great Koha-US merchandise through our Threadless account. Visit us at koha-US.org to find out more.
All right. Thank you for hanging with us. Let me talk a little bit about what I have learned from this conversation. This inspired me to revamp a report that we've done here at our library, and let me pull up mine. And I have a report that I run. Let me go ahead and get it going. This is a super report. Basically, it is a little bit of a lot of things that I've stolen from George over the years. And some of them we have taught in our videos here, but I have a report where I've learned how to basically, if you've seen our dashboard, George's dashboard videos, we have a series of videos that we did a while back where he talked about a dashboard where he brought up a bunch of stuff for, I think you've done it for.
It was for items.
Items.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you've seen that, there's bits of this in here, but basically I'm using a bunch of unions to add a bunch of different reports. Originally, when I was doing the reporting, I was running individual reports for different aspects of stats that we were reporting on. I've added all that together, and over the years, this is morphed because back when I started, when we were doing date ranges, I had to repeat the date in several places, or I've had to repeat the library in several places. Koha added the ability to where if you set the same parameter in multiple places, you'd only have to enter it once. I loved that. That was a lifesaver. Made reports easier and less likely to break because somebody entered in something wrong and wasn't reading the information. Just like George said, you can write it out and people don't read. But this is the report, and I would enter, like, for example, if I was doing last month's stats, I'd enter in a range, run the report, and this one takes a little while because, like I said, it is a union of several reports, so it takes not a ton of time. I've streamlined the reports over time. It used to take a lot longer to run these things because my coding wasn't so great, but these days it runs fairly well. This is pretty good for all that it's running in the background. So in a moment, we'll get the results for this, and you can see how much information I'm actually gathering on this report. And this is just for a particular library. So if you wanted to run this report for a library, that's fine. If you're running it for multiple libraries, if you're like one of our subset groups that, we have a set of district libraries, they do it for 8 libraries, they'd have to run it 8 times, and it would be a little bit of a chore. So, this shows the results for several different aspects. So each of these green headers is basically a different report that's being run and joined in a union. And so I had to concat the information. So because the amount of information or what was being shown varied. But this is how much information is being gathered.
That's a lot of stuff.
Yes, it is. And our conversation about date ranges and such inspired me. I have a work in progress right now. So I don't have this completely done. I am still reinventing the wheel on this particular report, but I am attacking several aspects of this report. For example, I wanted to be able to go beyond just the individual libraries. I wanted to be able to specify groups within this report. So if you were doing it for your subset, that you could do that. I also wanted to make the date picking a little bit easier on this. This was simply a month report, and we don't do any oddball in the middle of the month date picking. So I thought I'd simplify this. And so what I've done, I've gone into authorized values, and based on some things that George has done with his reports, I created an authorized value for our libraries, and I created an authorized value for months. I didn't go as far as years, and I took a little bit different approach on date picking there. The libraries, now I know from the videos that I went back and reviewed of George's work on his authorized values for libraries, I think you have your libraries set up to where a lot of the libraries, if they're in a certain group, they start the same on their codes. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's simplified things a lot here, because all of we have two groups, the Donovan County libraries, and all of their branch codes start with DONI, and no other library has a DONI at the beginning of their branch codes. And the other one is Prairie Hills School District, which they all start with PH, and none of our other libraries have a PH. So I can just do PH wildcard and get a dropdown that gives me all 4 of the schools, or DONI wildcard, and it gives me all 4 of the Donovan County libraries.
Right. And that's ideal, but I doubt a lot.
But I know it's not the way it always is.
Right. I doubt a lot of libraries or consortiums even consider those codes when they are creating their branches. We didn't think,
Yeah.
oh, down the road, this is going to be important, we should start, these groups off like this. And that would have been ideal. It would have simplified things. But, our branch codes are very unique, and going back and changing those codes would be a huge mess. And
it's a monumental amount of work.
And not something I could do on my end, because I'd have to go and have our vendor go back through all of our data and change all of that. And that I would not ever wish that upon anybody. So I had to take a slightly different approach on creating these.
I've been involved in a project doing that with item types that's been going on for like 4 years now. Eventually, my goal is that all print item types will start with the letter P, and all non-print item types will start with the letter N. And I'm getting there, but I've been at it for like 3 years, and it takes a lot of work to make that kind of transition.
Yeah. So I was trying to figure out a way to get around this, and this was my take on this. I'm not saying that this is a perfect approach, and somebody might find a way to attack this a little bit better, but this is how I approached it. So I have created these different groups. Basically, the authorized value for the individual branch matches what I've used in the actual branches. So the codes are the same. That was key for this list. So if you're approaching it from the aspect of your branches don't have any start off similar within the different groups, then I would suggest, number one, have your authorized value code match the same branch code that you're using for that branch, and I'll show you why in just a moment. Outside of that, I have another authorized value called all to encompass all libraries. I have for the subgroups, for example, like our, let's see here, where is it? So we have a subgroup, our district libraries, our CLN. I have CLN all. We have a West Bonner. I'll have a West Bonner or WB all. So those subgroups all have a little code and have all after it. I have a POCLD all here. So those are the authorized values that specify specific groups. So I have that. I also had another authorized value to do months. And this will look very familiar, George. The authorized value code isn't the same as what you've used, but the descriptions and the way it was organized, we went with the exact same description, it looks like. And
I have to tell you, I can't take credit for the year and month authorized values because those were in place when I got here. Those were something that Heather Braun or Liz Ray came up with before I started working for Northeast Kansas Library System.
yeah. But, you know, it made sense, you know, the authorized values, you know, if you're, you know, when you enter the authorized values, the codes, I mean, it's sorting by the code here, but when you display them in the drop down in the report, it's alphabetizing the descriptions. And of course, the months aren't alphabetized. So, so yes, adding the 001, the 02 in front of those months was key in order to make those months appear in the order that you want them.
I have a quick question here.
Sure.
So the authorized values here for the months, they do have to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because that's how Koha stores the months in the date time field. Is that correct?
You mean over on the code itself?
Right.
Yes. Yeah, I use this number, I believe, the code itself. So yeah, it goes in as 01, 02. I could be wrong, but just for consistency, I always do the 2 digits. And plus, if you're doing things in order, I think if I did just 1, 2, 3, I would get 1 and then 10, 11, 12, and then the 2, 3. And so it would shift the order here as well. So, you know, using the 2 digits is just standard practice for me.
Yeah, when this authorized value is plugged into the SQL report, the SQL report is going to look at 01 and it's just going to go, oh, it's a 1. And so it could be stored as an authorized value of just 1 without the leading 0. And it wouldn't make a difference in SQL, but it does make a difference to how it sorts when you look at the table. And as somebody who works with people who organize their file structure where the months are alphabetical, and you have to go in there and instead of going, well, it's the 5th month, I want the 5th one down. Well, the 5th one down is never May if it's alphabetical. And I've worked with people that have done that for years and years where it's hard for me. So that's why I do, that's the same reason I do the 01, 02, 03 in mine.
And even though SQL may accept a single digit for the month or day, this is a good practice because if something were to change down the road and it was required, I wouldn't have to go back and fix anything. So, you know, I know that Koha displays it with 2 digits. I know that it'll accept it as 2 digits. Examples are given in 2 digits. So that's just what I stuck with. So
I suppose for fun, you could use five leading zeros.
Oh, don't get me started. Okay. So I've been going back and revamping my report a little bit. I've been doing it section by section, recoding it. I've got one section that's taking a lot more time on it because of the complexity of it. But basically, let me show you a section of it. So here's like the first report. One of the things that I had to change in here was in the where it's looking for the particular branch. I had to add a and case for it so that when it's looking at, you know, this variable, which I am referring to this specific authorized value, and, you know, if that authorized value is listed as, you know, CLN all, then it's gonna coalesce these two, the items and the deleted items, because at some point in the date range, if the deleted items were part of that, it needs to take that into account as well. But it's going to make sure that all of these branches are covered in this report. So that's why I'm using an in here with this.
Right.
If I'm doing the POCLD all, then it's going to cover these branches. If I'm doing the West Bonner all, the WB all, then it's covering these two branches. If it's just using the all, the all code, then it's going to just stick in a percent to grab everything. Otherwise, it'll use the else, and it's going to coalesce, and it's going to use the code that was given. So if it's not using any of those other fields, it's going to use the code it's given. And that's why I use the same branch code for the individual libraries, because it'll just match the branch code of the branch, the individual branch. So if they're selecting one of the individual branches, it's using this else statement. Otherwise, it's going off of one of these exceptions. And so that's how it's differentiating between a group of libraries and an individual library. The other aspect that I took here was with the dates, and I'm using the betweens here, but basically I am, referring to that CIN month authorized value. And this one's a little bit more complicated. Some people will take it or leave it. I kind of liked how this worked out for me, but basically it's looking at that month, and it's looking at the month, and it's saying, okay, this month was specified, and it's looking at it, and it's saying if this month is this current month or greater. Basically, let's see here. Let me look at the logic that I have laid out. I'm adding that month. I'm concatenating that month with the current year. So I'm laying out the year of whatever this year is right now, and adding that with the hyphen, adding the month that was specified in the dropdown, and adding day one of that month. And it's looking at that, and it's saying if it's greater than now, then you're going to basically use that same month in day one, but go back a year. So if the month that you're picking hasn't happened yet for this year, then go to last year's for this month, for the month that you selected. So, like for example, if I picked September, we're not in September yet, it's going to use September from last year. So basically, that's the logic that's going on here. Otherwise, it will use this year and the month. So if in this year, if we are in that month, or that month has already transpired for this year, then go ahead and use this year. Otherwise, use last year for the year. So that's the logic that's going on there. And I'll use the same logic for the second part of the between, but basically, say, the other end of that is day one of the previous, or of the next month that was selected. I did that. I'm not going off of the end of the month. I always refer to the beginning of the next month, because the end of the month always varies. So it's 28, or sometimes it's 29, or it's 30 or 31. So I have a consistent range reference that I am using in the report. So when I run this report, this is what it looks like. I can pick individual libraries, or I can pick a group of libraries, and I can pick a month. And like I said, if I choose a month that hasn't transpired yet, this is going to go off of last year, September of last year, rather than this year. So the result is I've loved the results so far. This report is only partial. because I'm still working out some of the logistics of incorporating these things. I'm also doing another approach to this report because I can pick groups of libraries. I wanted to make some things a little bit more clear in the report. So basically, I'm showing the same information, but I'm showing on the results, I'm showing the individual results for the individual branches, and then I'm showing a total for the entire group in that category at the end of it. So, I have the totals for the Athol library, for the Bookmobile, for the Harrison library, and so forth. And then down at the end of the group, it's going to show me the totals for all of it. And unfortunately, I hadn't had any success with what was it, the roll-up? Was that?
Yeah, roll-up has to be done with count. And I think what you're doing here involves some summing.
Yeah, I hadn't had any success with the roll-up. So basically it's running the same report again, but without the grouping of the individual branches. And so it's getting the totals for all of them together at the end. So basically it's a union at the end of that that's giving me those totals. But so far it works pretty well. I'm getting those individual libraries for each section and then a total, which is really nice. And I'm sure that the libraries that have to report for those groups will be appreciative. They can just enter the information once, run it, and they're going to get the totals for the individual libraries, but they'll also get it for the entire group. So no matter how they have to report it, they'll get the information they have that they want, and they don't have to run this multiple times.
And that's, in the email that Michael and I had, that's where he took one of the reports that I did that I showed in that Slack thread was a report that we use here in Neckles, and Michael was able to take it and solve another problem of his with that spreadsheet stuff.
Yeah.
By grouping together the collection codes, right?
Right. And because it took so much time to count all those different collection codes up and using case. And so this is what the report looks like now. So we've got the library's name, and then instead of having all those collection codes, it's broken down into audience. And so we've got adult, and if we do have something that has no collection code, we do count those as adult items, but I do have that separately so I can see what those are. And then we have children, and most libraries don't have much other, but we can see it's so much easier to read and just copy over those numbers than trying to add everything up.
Right.
And if we look at the code here, so I used the case and I listed out all of the different collection codes that would be stuck
It would qualify as adult or children's, right? Or
right.
Other.
And originally I just had the adult, the children, and the other, and then else unknown. But then I realized that we wanted to specify between something that had no collection code and something that had an unknown collection code, because if I go in someday and I add a new collection code, I may not remember to add it in here somewhere. And so this way, if I've got an unknown collection code, it shows up as unknown, and then I'll know I need to go in later and add that collection code in on one of these three.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's a good strategy, actually. That's I've been bitten many times by writing a report that relies on something that gets changed later, and then 4 months goes by before somebody says these numbers look wrong.
Right.
Yeah, if I did something like that, I'd probably add a comment to that saying, please update report, because if you're not doing it, somebody's going to see unknown and think, what does that mean? What do I, what is unknown? But maybe
I don't know.
Maybe add the comment so that the person that takes my place down the road knows what to do with it if they run into that result. So anything that you can do to make that a little bit clearer is always going to be helpful down the road. I mean, because you're not going to be adding those on a regular basis. So it's going to be an unfamiliar situation when you run into it once in a while. And even for myself, if I set this up and 2 years from now, we add a collection and I run into that unknown, it's like I might not even think about I'm supposed to do something with it. But if it says do something with it, then I will be on top of that. So
very true.
Might not hurt to add a little bit of instruction for those rare instances that crop up in there. So,
and then if we look at the date pickers here, I did go ahead and I used George's month and year for the date picker so that they just select the month and year. And then I've got a second version of this report where it just uses the previous month, and those are the ones that are run by the cron job and get sent to the email. And the reason we have both is because there was one month where the reports didn't work right, and then I had to go back and run it for a previous month.
I always have one that runs based on the drop downs, just because somebody will phone me and say, I want to run this report again. And so instead of saying, well, let me go in there and modify it and run it for you, I can just say, go run number 38 or whatever.
I went back and forth on doing an authorized value for a year simply because that's an authorized value that you will at some point, you may have pre-populated it for many years, but at some point you will have to go and touch it and update it. You'll probably be dead by the time somebody has to update it if you populated it with enough. But it's like I doubt we're going to go back farther than a year in our case. And I also, the way I've set it up is I'm not going to get no results if I put in a year that hasn't existed yet. So, if I go into a month that hasn't transpired yet, it's just going to go to the previous year. I thought that was an elegant solution in my case.
The reason I went ahead and left it in there, and I do update, I add a new year every year. But we have, legacy data. We have some patrons that were added as far back as 2007. And so this way, because it is being used in so many reports, I just felt like it's a good thing to have there. So, and every year, in February, usually around the second or third day of the month, I will usually get an email saying, I can't run this report because there isn't any, because it stops at 2022. And it's like, oh, I guess I got to go in there. And somebody reminds me every year to add the next year, but I don't have any future years. I only have past years, the current year and past years in it. So
the other reason I didn't even bother with years is because, we're dealing with a year's worth of, up to a year's worth of data with this. Koha has been making strides to adjust things in tables so that statistics are held on to longer in more efficient ways. But some of the statistics that our tables or our reports refer to are like statistics. We clean up our statistics tables after a certain amount of time. So being able to go back further than a year, when you go beyond a year or two, beyond the range that we start cleaning up some stuff, you're going to get varied results from when that year was actually going on and then going back further and further. So when you go back further and further, you run the risk of getting some skewed data because some tables have been cleaned up. So this prevents us from, getting wrong information.
I still have, the issue, we still have people that run reports and get wrong data. And I try to make sure that reports say, the data is better when it's fresh. But we use it in so many reports beyond just statistics and the issues table, because we have reports that use the year based on patron added. And like I said, we have patrons added as far back as 2007, and So there's patron data, and it can also be applied to item data for items that were, and copyright data. So in some cases, I do have this happen every now and then where somebody will say, you know, I tried to run a report on, you know, circulations during February of 2007, and I just get a 0. And then I'll say, well, that's because, you know, the data only goes back 2 years. And so then it's just a conversation with them on where to find the good data, because there is data, you know, like with what Michael said, a lot of this is based on state reports. And the Kansas State Library has an archive of data on their website that goes back about 10 or 15 years, but then you can actually go to the Kansas State Library's catalog and see data all the way back to like the 1960s. And so that usually leads me, you know, when somebody says, you know, can I get a report for patrons by zip code all the way back to 2001, my conversation is usually along the lines of, okay, I can only go back for that kind of data 25 months. And you weren't even a member of this consortium that long ago. And when you joined, you weren't automated. And so there isn't even any computer data. You know, all the data would be, you know, paper files somewhere in your library. So that, and then I can say, but there's all this data at the state library, and here's how to find it. You know, here's how to find what your library submitted to the state for their statistics for 1968. You know, and that's a good conversation to have with them. So,
Yeah.
so I don't mind having the years in there because it does open doors to other conversations a lot of times.
All right. Well, yeah, I think this was a great conversation. You know, we have touched on some of these elements in the past. I think, you know, today we've gone a little bit more in depth on some of these elements. But you know, Michael, I want to thank you because you asked a question and it inspired. Well, it helped us to, you know, talk about some of these things and brought this up for us to approach this in our videos. But it also inspired me to take a new look at an old report and see what I could do to make some improvements. It's gonna help our other libraries. Originally, when I did this report, it was just for me, and then I made it so that other libraries could use it, and I've had to tweak it here and there so that it worked for more libraries than just what I expected. But you know, I always like to find a way to make a report more useful for more libraries. And yeah, now I've got a way to add those groups. I've got a simplified way to put in the dates, which is what, you know, your question kind of initiated my inspiration on. And I've got a way to do some subtotaling in there for those groups of libraries. So thank you for asking questions. And I want to encourage anybody in the Koha community, if you have questions, write to the email groups or go into Slack and ask questions, because
Leave a comment on this video on YouTube.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because you never know when your question might produce some results that other people need, or might inspire somebody to do something a little bit different, take a new approach. So
I want to point out that this might be one of the longest videos we've ever done.
How long
it took us so long. I'm actually in Portsmouth now. Look out the window there.
I don't think so, but thank you.
And one of the things that initiated this was the idea that there's got to be an easier way to do this. And so if any of you have that idea when you're doing something, there probably is an easier way to do it, and just reach out for help. And there's lots of help out there.
I'm all about easier. And, you know, I've learned some techniques that I hadn't done before. You know, I really had not tackled using customized authorized values in a report. And, you know, I've seen George do it, but it's like, I don't know if I want to get into that, but you know, this inspired me to do that. And, you know, I like the case. I don't use a lot of cases in my reports. This was fun. It helped me to be a little bit more comfortable with it. So
that is one thing I would say about authorized values is when you go and you add those things, like, you know, adding the year every year. If I have authorized values tables that work for collection codes and item types so that I can group them with wildcards. And that is one thing that when you start creating them like that, you do have to think about them every now and then and say, oh, I added a new collection code. So not only do I need to add the new collection code, but I need to go over to my other authorized values thing with collection codes in it and make sure that that's in there too.
yeah.
So that is one drawback of doing custom authorized values, is that you've got to keep them up to date manually. And I actually have written reports to help me track my authorized values, my custom authorized values tables, so that I can run a report that says, oh, this one's out of date. Go in and update it.
All right. Well, our next video will be on the flip side of the conference, but I want to thank Michael for joining us today. And I also want to remind everybody, you know, you can find our videos on the koha-US website, koha-us.org. You can find that there. But you can also find these videos on YouTube at youtube.com/koha-US, no hyphen, and you can subscribe to our channel. You can subscribe to the playlist and get notified anytime that we add new videos. And you can also like and comment, and we want you to smash that like button. We want you to comment. Let us know what you think of what we talked about, or if there's something that you would like to see us talk about. So please be sure to subscribe and to let us know your thoughts. At least let us know that these are helpful. But until next time, we'll see you later.
Bye.